In 1692, the small town of Salem, Massachusetts went absolutely wild. Over 200 people were accused of witchcraft, and 20 were executed. It's one of the most infamous moments in American history. A full-blown witch hunt that turned neighbor against neighbor. And it left such a mark that witch trial is still used today to describe any massive injustice. But here's the question: how much of what we think we know is actually true? Let's dig in and bust some myths about the Salem Witch Trials. Before we start, make sure you're subscribed to All Things History and drop a comment telling us what wild historical event you want to see next. All right, let's see if you would have survived Salem. The chaos before the hunt. Before the witch panic even began, Salem was already a mess. Refugees from a war between England and France had flooded into town, stretching food and resources thin. Local rivalries over land, church power, and politics boiled over. Everyone was looking for someone to blame. So when two young girls, 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams, the daughter and niece of the local minister, started having strange fits, people were quick to assume the devil was involved. A doctor diagnosed them as victims of witchcraft, and under pressure from the adults, the girls pointed their fingers at 3 women: Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; Sarah Osborne, an elderly outcast; and Tituba, an enslaved woman from the Paris household. Those accusations set off one of the most bizarre and deadly chapters in American history. Myth number 1. Only women were accused. A lot of people assume the Salem witch trials targeted only women, but that's not true. About 1 in 4 of the accused were actually men, and roughly 30% of those executed were male. Being a man didn't make you safe. Some were accused just for being related to an alleged witch or for trading with native tribes. Basically, if you angered the wrong person or lived on the wrong side of town, you could find yourself in chains. The Crucible Effect. Fast forward to 1953, when playwright Arthur Miller turned this chaos into The Crucible, a story meant to mirror the McCarthy-era Red Scare, America's own political witch hunt for communists. The play was a hit, and it cemented the image of the Salem trials as a tale of hysterical young girls and innocent women. But the truth was more complicated. Older women, especially widows who owned property, were just as likely to be targeted, partly because they had something others wanted: land and independence. Rich versus poor. Here's something most people don't realize. Salem wasn't just one place. There were 2, Salem Town and Salem Village. Salem Town was wealthy and coastal, full of merchants and trade. Salem Village was poor, rural, and deeply Puritan. Most of the accusers came from the struggling village, while most of the accused came from the wealthier town. So yeah, jealousy and class conflict were definitely part of the story. Even inside the village, though, people were divided. Some supported the witch trials, and others wanted them stopped, often depending on where they lived or how close they were to the minister, Reverend Samuel Parris. Parris was a fiery preacher who fanned the flames of hysteria. Those who opposed him tried to have him removed, but his followers doubled down and pushed the trials even harder. Voices of reason. Not everyone in Massachusetts was on board with this madness. Cotton Mather, a respected minister, begged the court not to rely on spectral evidence, testimony based on dreams or visions. His son, who was president of Harvard, agreed, saying it was better to let 10 guilty witches go free than condemn 1 innocent person. Their pleas worked. The colonial governor eventually banned spectral evidence, set up a new court, and pardoned the remaining accused. By then, though, the damage was done. 20 people had been killed, and the hysteria had scarred the community forever. Yes, they even executed dogs. As if things weren't already insane enough, records show that 2 dogs were also executed for witchcraft. One was accused by a girl who said it tried to bewitch her. Another was said to be controlled by a witch. So yeah, Salem's paranoia literally went to the dogs. Not the first or the worst. It's easy to think Salem was the start of witch trials, but Europe had been doing it for centuries. A book called Malleus Maleficarum, basically a witch hunting manual, kicked off a wave of executions across Europe. Between the 1500s and 1600s, an estimated 50,000 people were executed for witchcraft there. Compared to that, Salem's one-year ordeal almost looks small, but it became famous because it was among the last major witch hunts in the Western world. The myths keep burning. Movies often show witches being burned at the stake, but that never happened in Salem. All 19 of the executed were hanged, not burned. The only exception was Giles Corey, an 80-year-old man who refused to confess. He was pressed to death with heavy stones. Brutal, but true. The LSD grain theory. Now here's one of the wildest theories. Maybe the girls who started it all weren't faking. Some historians believe they could have eaten ergot-infected rye, a fungus that causes hallucinations similar to LSD. If that's true, the initial fits and visions might have been real. A tragic case of bad bread and worse superstition. Rediscovering the real Gallows Hill. For centuries, people thought the hangings happened on Gallows Hill. But in 2016, researchers discovered that the actual site was nearby, at Proctor's Ledge, which today sits next to a Walgreens parking lot. A memorial now marks the real spot where the victims were executed. Aftermath and apologies. By 1697, the colony admitted the trials were a disaster and held a day of fasting and reflection. 5 years later, the courts declared the trials unlawful. 9 years after that, restitution was paid to victims' families. And in 1957, over 250 years later, the state of Massachusetts officially apologized. Better late than never, right? Why it really happened. So, what actually caused the Salem Witch Trials? There's no single answer. It was a perfect storm of fear, religion, politics, money, gender, and power, all mixed with a healthy dose of paranoia. Those same ingredients still exist today, which is exactly why the story of Salem still matters. Could something like the Salem Witch Trials ever happen again? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to All Things History for more stories that prove the truth really is stranger than fiction.